And we're back, Sports Next Door, myself, Owen, along with me, my good friend, Max. We are going to enter our Talkin Hockey segment and a quick recap of Game 7 between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Islanders. Tampa Bay is going to be headed back to the Stanley Cup Final in consecutive seasons after winning last season in the bubble. And I imagine they will be the heavy favorites going into this series. But why don't we just talk quickly about how they got there?
Yeah, if they're the heavy favorites, it will be because they closed out a series that was in question. Their back was against the wall, doubts were rising, and they answered all questions. A 1-0 win sounds like an Islanders score, like, oh, the Islanders made it their type of hockey. I don't think that gives enough credit to the Bolts. This was a game that easily could have been 3-4-0. It was absolutely an Isles game in terms of low offense for the Isles. Very few, I think they had 18 shots on net, not a lot of offensive zone time, very few slot chances. The few they get, Vasilevsky flawless. And the Lightning's only goal comes shorthanded, but they got a lot of momentum off of that, generated a lot more scoring chances off of that. And this easily could have been 3-4-0 game. That's hockey. Sometimes the puck's just a couple millimeters in the wrong spot on your stick. But the mark of a consistent winning hockey team is you can have those games and still find a way to get the W. And a roster with guys like Vasilevsky, with Hedman, with a roster that's overall just been to the finals and back is going to know how to get that done defensively. And that's going to be what the Habs are up against in this really polarized in Stanley Cup Finals. There's a couple storylines you can run with. I felt at the start of the season like the Bolts were my favorites to go and win the cup. Nothing's really changed there. The Habs finishing last in the regular season of all the teams that entered the playoffs. So it's a bit of a stretch to say the worst team versus the best team, because Tampa wasn't great during the regular season, and now Montreal's looked so fantastic. You can't really call them David, but yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
So the huge difference there is Montreal has Cole Caufield, right? That is the enormous difference between that Montreal team and this one, where they play this stifling type of hockey, similar to the New York Islanders, which Tampa has just experienced. But now they have this kid who arrives on the scene, is like, hey, I'm just going to go join the Stanley Cup for my first playoff action and just light it up, right? Like, he's been superb, spectacular, whatever you want to apply, electrifying. He's quick, he's small, he works in the crevices well, he's tough on the puck, surprisingly. Like, in playoff hockey, you worry about a guy of his diminutive size getting punished, but he's been great. And when the puck's on his stick, it's magical. And that is what Montreal had been looking for. They didn't really have that scoring pop. They still don't. As a matter of fact, like, they haven't had a ton of production overall. If they score two goals in a game, they win. And if they don't, they lose. And that's pretty much what they've had to get to. Caufield especially stepping up. He's getting more and more comfortable as he gets more and more reps, and was huge in the Vegas series. And that's been the biggest difference of this team. He's the story up front. And then the story in the net is Carey Price, man. Like, this is it. This is his final stamp of, I am still the greatest goalie of this generation. I am up there as one of the greatest goalies all time. And he's good for 3. Can you believe that saves? And he's good for about 30 saves a night. It's truly astounding. And this Montreal team, don't count them out. They play a style of hockey that just makes the other team's fans pull their hair out, because they just rip their forwards to shreds. Why can't you do anything? Mark Stone is a big example of that. Of course, the Leafs, we don't need to talk about that. The Jets as well. And you got to eventually think that Montreal's just figured out how to shut down opposing teams' forwards. And if you do that, then there's not much offense coming from the other side. But we will see. Tampa is the toughest test yet. Montreal keeps elevating the level of difficulty, and they've arrived at the final boss.
Yeah, you could make excuses up till the third round. I think Varis out. This Leafs team is cursed. Shifley out. This Jets team doesn't have defense. But the Golden Knights overcame a stiff test in Colorado. And their forwards looked serviceable up until that Habs series. So you've got to give a ton of credit to the Habs for that. And you can't make excuses for this Bolts team, whatever happens. The thing that's the most interesting microcosm, I think, of this is going to be the special teams. Tampa Bay is sitting near a 40% playoff power play. The Habs sitting at the 94% playoff penalty kill. It's going to be a big indicator of, has there been some flukiness going the Habs way? Has the clock struck midnight? Or are they just one of the best hockey teams in the league? As you've mentioned, Carey Price can elevate a team that maybe not every man on the roster is playing with the level of skill, physicality, and urgency to meet their criteria. And it won't matter because Carey Price, as you said, one of the goalies of this generation. But if Vasilevsky isn't in that conversation yet, he's got to be knocking on the door. Or maybe it's next generation, but might win the Vezina trophy for a second time, might get his hands on a second Stanley Cup. He's been one of the best goaltenders in the league for the past couple of years. And everything Price can do to win you a game, Vasilevsky can do as well. So it might not make for the funnest hockey, but it's going to be its own kind of like blood chilling thrill to watch these two goaltenders duel and see how the pressure from them elevates each other's level of play as well.
Yes, that part will be fun if you are a goaltending lover. And I think there's enough offense in this series that there are going to be some goals each way. Montreal does enough to get pucks on the net, and of course Tampa is absolutely loaded through their four lines, so they'll be buzzing around. We know that for sure. The last thing I want to talk about this series is Montreal. Once again, I mentioned it already, but they're giving me some Team of Destiny vibes, akin to that 2019 Raptors playoff run where they just kept overcoming the next hurdle. And for the Raptors, it took some key injuries. Obviously, we're not going to discount that. The Golden State had some key injuries that may have changed the outcome of that series. But then a solid core group of guys who play on a string and put together some of their best performances. And that's what we're seeing from Montreal. They've had a little bit of injury luck. That happens to most teams that win in sports. And they're getting it now. And now they're here. And it's Danault being absolutely shut down. It's Corey Perry, Eric Stahl, Arturi Lehkonen, Joel Armia, who is possibly going to miss the first couple games of the series due to COVID protocols, which is huge because he's been their top like depth guy. And then of course you got Caufield, you've got Suzuki, you got the guys up front with some skill, and they're playing on a string in the top four of Montreal's D. Let's see how much they got left in the tank, but they've been really, really solid. And I'm going to pick Tampa in 6, but I would not be surprised if the Canadians walked home with Canada's first Stanley Cup since they did it back in 93.
I called Tampa at the start of the season, and I'm hoping I'm right, but man, this city went so crazy at just the win in the conference that it would be pretty cool to be in the city that wins the Stanley Cup, especially this city. Yeah. So I will not be disappointed at all to be a part of that.
Awesome. I look forward to the emergency pod where Max is recording from his phone, just out in the streets of Montreal.
Hopefully not in a cop car.
Yeah, hopefully.